in the horror genre. I'm your host, Nicole, and it's time to share another dark tale.
Hello, friends and weirdos, and welcome to another religion and horror episode. Tonight, we are talking about Jacob's Ladder from 1990, and I am joined once again by friend of the show, Jacqueline. Welcome back, Jacqueline.
Thanks. I'm so excited to be back. I always love coming on Light and Shadow and chatting with you. So intellectual.
I feel like it's been a while since you've been on, like maybe too long.
It kind of has been a while. What was the last? I think the last thing we did together on Light and Shadow was Silent Hill.
Wow. Yeah, that's been over a year ago. So it has been a long time. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that movie actually has some relevance to today's discussion. So we'll have to talk about those parallels a little bit. But for anybody who is not familiar with you, please remind the folks who you are and where they can find you.
Sure. So I am one of 3 hosts on A Cut Above Horror Review. It's John Hydraberg and myself, and we have a great time reviewing a different film each week. We rotate who picks the movie, and there's no rhyme or reason to it. We, cover any time period of horror, any subgenre of horror. We do often like to do theme months, like Women in Horror Month, which is one of my favorites. As well as more offbeat themes like Browvember, where every film for the month featured a unibrow. So there's an idea of the intellectual level of our show and why I like to come and talk to Nicole. No, I'm just kidding. Sometimes we can get serious too, but sometimes we talk about unibrows.
Yeah, I mean, you got to keep it fresh. Listen, the horror podcast market is saturated, but I guarantee you no one else has done a unibrow theme. One of a kind.
I feel confident that you're right about that.
And I've been on y'all's show several times.
Many times. You're the honorary 4th member.
Exactly. I get called the 4th member. It's so fun to just like show up and it's just easy and fun. It truly is like sitting around with friends. I really appreciate that a lot. I was on for Smile 2 a few weeks ago and I was so sad because you were not there. So I had to like hold it down for all the ladies.
Yes.
You were greatly missed. You were greatly missed.
Well, thank you. But if there were anyone that I would want to take my place when I couldn't be there, it would be you. So I'm glad that you were already scheduled to come on anyway, but it was so perfect that you could just kind of slide in there and be that third person. So it was great. That was a great episode, by the way. I listened to it the day it came out and you were fantastic.
Thank you. Thanks. That's a movie that like was not really on my radar. And so it was nice to have an excuse to watch something, kind of different. And I really enjoyed it. And also I have to give props to Hydraberg because he did a great job hosting in your absence. I know he was a little bit nervous about it, but I think he did a great job.
He does a great job. Yeah, he gets worried and nervous about it. Oh, I don't know if I can do it. But no, he was great.
So, like I said, this is a religion and horror episode, but we already did a religious background. I can't remember. I think you talked about your religious background maybe on our invitation episode, I think was the one.
I think it might have been Silent Hill. I'm not sure. One of those.
Yeah, one of those two. So if you guys want to hear Jacqueline's like full extensive religious background, plug for my other episodes, go listen to one of those episodes. But since we've already done that, I thought in lieu of that, we would talk about something different because I first heard about Jacob's Ladder on a, I guess, miniseries, docuseries that was on Bravo in 2004 called Bravo's 100 Scariest Movie Moments. And this show has become kind of like a cult thing with people of our age. We sort of all watched it. And so I just wanted to talk about that a little bit. Like, do you remember watching that when it came on TV?
Vividly, every year that they would run it.
Yes.
I was obsessed with it, and I even recorded every episode onto DVDs back when that was a thing, you would do. Now it's on YouTube. You can watch it whenever. Then they did 30 more scariest movie moments. And then there was like 13 even more scariest. So I have them all recorded on DVD. And I don't know about you, but for me, watching that series for the first time, that for me was kind of a turning point in my horror fandom, because before that, I would just kind of watch new horror movies as they came out, and I was able to see them, as well as the kind of like classic 70s horror that my mom introduced me to when I was in high school. And that was kind of the extent of my horror fandom. And I knew I loved horror and I would like seek out horror movies, but I hadn't done so much like wide exploration yet. So that series introduced me to a lot of films that I had never seen or in some cases ever even heard of before, including this one. And so that was where I started to get like more serious in trying to build comprehensive knowledge of horror across time and subgenre, and as well as, you know, outside of American films. So that was a huge thing for me, and I would watch it not just at Halloween time, but since I recorded it, I would just watch it, you know, every couple of months, honestly.
Yeah, I had a very similar experience. I mean, I heard of so many movies on that I just weren't on my radar. And it's honestly kind of interesting that a network like Bravo, which is like known for like trashy reality TV, no hate, put together such a robust list from like all different decades. And movies like I remember Diabolique was one of those movies I had never heard of. It's this like French black and white movie. Jacob's Ladder was one. I'm trying to think of other ones that really stood out to me. Rosemary's Baby. No, not Rosemary's Baby. Stepford Wives. Stepford Wives. I vividly remember that one because that was a movie I hadn't seen yet, which of course I had heard of that movie. But like there were just so many moments that pointed me to, okay, I've got to watch that. I've got to watch that. I've got to watch that. And same as you, I watched it. I think if they would rerun it, you know, every October or whatever. And I even last year had a little house party at Halloween, and I had a bunch of stuff playing on our TV just before like we watched a scary movie for the night. And that was one of the things I had the last episode that was like 20-1 or something. I just had playing in the background. And one of my like normie friends was like, what is this? Like, so I feel like there's something about it that still sort of intrigues people and like sucks them in.
Well, you're absolutely right. It is such it's like a surprisingly comprehensive overview of films that really are, I think, quite essential. And I even got real nerdy about it. I wrote down every movie like in order from 100 down to 1, and I started checking them off as I saw them, trying to like rack up numbers, you know what I mean? And it was that, and also in tandem with a list put out by Rue Morgue magazine in their Halloween 2005 issue of like the top 100 horror movies you've never seen. And it was kind of more offbeat, lesser known films, but no less essential and no less high quality. And so I wrote out all those movies and started keeping that tally too. And that led me to some really incredible films as well. So those two things together were like my syllabus that kind of laid the foundation for my horror fandom. And I'm so happy that you had that same experience with the Bravo series that I did.
So, folks, if you haven't seen it, you got to seek it out. And like, even
it's on YouTube.
Yeah, it's on YouTube. I can like hear the background music and like the specific graphics they used at the time.
It's like spinning into place. Yeah.
Yes, it's so of its time. But to me, it's still so fun. And like, so that one, I will still put that on the background sometimes, like when I'm decorating for Halloween. And then, you know, I love any kind of list. So Shudder did a 101 Scariest Movie Moments like a few years ago. Yes. That one's good. And now we have all of the In Search of Darkness madness that they're like, you know, the 90s one I just watched, and like there's a 90 to 94 and then a 95 to 99. And each of those are like 6 hours long. And I just eat it all up. But I do feel like it all started with Bravo.
Absolutely. Love it.
Yeah.
Presenting the 100 Scariest Movie Moments, a countdown of the greatest moments of cinema shot.
So we were introduced to Jacob's Ladder from this TV show. But when did you first actually see the whole movie?
I want to say it was around 2009, 2010. somewhere in there. I had acquired the DVD. Well, there was a time in my life when I really acquired a lot of physical media, and that has significantly slowed down in recent years. But I would just accumulate movies with the intention of watching them someday, but I was just trying to build a collection. And so I had acquired Jacob's Ladder on DVD, but I hadn't gotten around to watching it for a while until about 2010, 2011, I think.
So I just finally watched this movie for the first time last year, I think.
Okay.
Like it's been within a year. And I don't remember why I finally did it, but I was like, okay, this is one of those that's been on the list forever. I need to check it out. And I was like so delighted by it. I mean, I really dug it, and it was a movie that just stuck with me. And it's interesting in that it is like dark and trippy, and I expected that from everything I'd seen about it. It was like the tone I expected, but it sort of went some different directions than I thought, and it left me with different feelings than I expected. And I was like, oh, there's kind of more going on in this movie than sort of meets the eye. And of course, there's like just a ton of like religious ideas, themes, references, just a ton of that stuff to unpack. And so I immediately thought this have to do a religion and horror episode on this movie. So I want to get into it, folks. This is your spoiler warning. We're gonna dive into all these things. We're gonna dissect all these things. So if you've not seen Jacob's Ladder, please, this is one you got to check it out before you hear us discuss it. So please go check it out and then rejoin us.
Every day, Jacob Singer goes to work.
What's wrong?
It's one of those days.
And every day, he wonders what is happening to him.
Maybe it's the pressure, Jake.
They're like demons, Jess. They weren't human.
What were they, Jake? Let me look at your hand. You have a very strange line. See, according to this, you're already dead.
Something's wrong, Jake. They're coming after me. I don't know who they are or what they are, but they're gonna get me, and I'm scared, Jake. I've seen them too.
Maybe the demons are real.
He's running 106 feet with...
This is barbaric.
I can get rid of the demons.
Who are you?
I can block the ladder. Where are you taking me? Where am I?
Where do you want to go?
Home.
This is your home. You're dead.
I'm not dead.
What are you then?
I'm alive.
Jacob Singer is a Vietnam War veteran living in New York City, haunted by terrifying visions and an overwhelming sense that something is deeply wrong. The film opens during his time in Vietnam in 1971, where his platoon is suddenly attacked after soldiers begin behaving erratically, seemingly driven mad by an unseen force. Amid the chaos, Jacob is bayoneted before the story abruptly shifts to years later. In New York, Jacob works as a postal worker and struggles to move on from the death of his young son, Gabe, whose loss continues to weigh heavily on him. His marriage has ended, and he now lives with his girlfriend, Jezebel, whose carefree lifestyle contrasts sharply with Jacob's growing paranoia. Strange encounters begin to consume his life. He catches glimpses of grotesque demonic figures in crowds and on the subway. Faces twist unnaturally, strangers seem to be watching him, and he experiences vivid hallucinations that blur the line between reality and nightmare. Jacob begins to suspect that he's being followed by mysterious government agents. When he reconnects with members of his old Vietnam unit, he discovers they have experienced similarly disturbing visions. Before they can uncover the truth, several of his fellow veterans are violently killed under suspicious circumstances. Jacob teams up with another surviving soldier to investigate, eventually learning about rumors of a secret military drug called the ladder. According to the theory, the drug was administered to American soldiers in Vietnam to increase aggression, but instead caused terrifying hallucinations, paranoia, and violent behavior. The veterans prepare to sue the government, believing they were unwilling test subjects. Throughout his ordeal, Jacob finds moments of peace with his former chiropractor, Louis, whose calm wisdom offers a different interpretation of the horrors surrounding him. Louis explains that the frightening visions may not be demons at all, but manifestations of Jacob's inability to let go of his life. He suggests that if a person clings to fear and attachment, angels can appear to be devils because they are trying to free the soul from earthly suffering. This spiritual perspective becomes increasingly important as Jacob's experiences grow more fragmented. Jacob's grip on reality completely unravels. He finds himself slipping unpredictably between different versions of his life. His ex-wife appears as though they are still together, Gabe is suddenly alive again, and time itself ceases to follow any logical order. His terrifying hospital sequence, in which he is wheeled through a hellish medical facility filled with mutilated patients and monstrous doctors, represents the peak of his psychological descent. In the film's final revelation, it becomes clear that Jacob never truly returned from Vietnam. He is still lying mortally wounded on the battlefield after the attack. The entire story has been the dying thoughts of a man struggling to release his attachments to life, his guilt, and his grief. Guided by the vision of his son Gabe, Jacob peacefully ascends a staircase toward a bright light, finally accepting his death. Back in Vietnam, military personnel pronounce him dead. So I am endlessly fascinated by just the visuals of this movie. There's tons of artistic stuff. There are lots of books, just lots of little nods. And that led me to kind of do a little bit of digging on who made this movie and, what were they thinking and what inspired them. And I found an article on Letterboxd that has just a ton of great information in it. So I'm going to pull a few things out of that. But this movie was directed by Adrian Lyne, who I believe also did Fatal Attraction, and written by Bruce Rubin. And the two of them together, I think, really both brought very unique things to this movie. Writer Bruce Joel Rubin, and this is from the Letterboxd article, he says the idea for Jacob's Ladder started with a psychedelic mishap. While a film student in New York, Rubin was accidentally given an entire eyedropper full of LSD when a single drop was the usual dose, and experienced an intense trip that he says lasted somewhere between 3 and 4 billion years, taking him to heaven and hell and way beyond.
You're going to say 3 to 4 days.
The only way for me to get out of hell was to write a movie, he said, and that's what I did. When writing the script, Rubin imagined Jacob's visions as bringing demonic medieval imagery into a modern context. However, Adrian Lyne rejected this aesthetic approach, believing that audiences would find it jarring and even amusing, and instead he wanted to root those visions in distortions of the flesh. This idea came from his recollection of the highly publicized thalidomide scandal of the late 50s and early 60s, where the untested tranquilizer was prescribed to pregnant women suffering morning sickness and caused severe birth defects in their babies. So when we glimpse the devil during the film's nightmarish strobe-lit party scene, its wing appears as kind of a thalidomide rib-like thing, as Lynn described it, while its hooves look sort of flesh-based.
So I did a little reading about thalidomide, however you say that drug.
Thalidomide. I think you're saying it right.
Okay, thalidomide.
Yes, I think I didn't say it right. I think you are saying it right.
Because I had vague memories of reading about that years ago, but I wanted to refresh my memory on that stuff. And I was reading that it could cause birth defects such as babies being born with missing limbs or being born with no bones.
Wow. No bones.
I mean, talk about real life horror. Yep. I mean, that's it's almost too much to bear to think about that.
Yeah. I mean, this movie is so visually striking. It has such a specific mood and vibe, and it's interesting to see how all these influences came together. Because, like I said, a lot of the like biblical stuff and all that makes sense to me. You know where that would come from. But some of the weirder elements, it's interesting to see that it was inspired by real stuff. And then, of course, there have been rumors about the government testing, drugs on civilians, soldiers, whoever. There's, of course, like the MK Ultra thing and all of that. And of course, at the end of this movie, there's that little disclaimer that says that this drug BZ like was tested on Vietnam soldiers or whatever. And so I was like, okay, well, I want to look into that a little bit. And so apparently that is not definitively true, like that statement. As we know, we can't trust this is true statements on movies. Right. I'm sure in 1990 people probably believed it, but there's a couple things that also inspired that statement. One, they were giving Vietnam soldiers like tons of like caffeine pills and like uppers to try to keep them both alert, and also they did think that it would make them more aggressive if they gave them these like all these like uppers.
Wow.
And of course, soldiers were doing they were smoking marijuana, but also doing large amounts of like cocaine and heroin because they could get heroin very easily from Cambodia when they were in Vietnam. So you do have this sort of like pool of drugs. The Vietnam War was the first war where like drug culture was just really prevalent and commonplace among soldiers. And so even though this very specific drug and this very specific experiment that we hear about in this movie is not a real thing, I think the atmosphere is still very believable that this sort of thing could happen because of just the rampant drug use. There is a group of soldiers at Edgewood Arsenal in Maryland. They did drug trials on some of the soldiers there, and it was voluntary. Like they signed up for it. They knew they were going to be in a drug trial. But they said that they were testing things that they did not know they were exposed to. So like they weren't basically told what some of these experiments were. And some of the chemicals tested were nerve agents, mustard agents, nerve agent antidotes, nerve agent reactivators, psychoactive agents, irritants, riot control agents, and then alcohol and caffeine. So all of these things were tested on some of these soldiers. And I think it was in 2011, they brought a suit and basically said, we've been having problems our entire life because you experimented on us with these drugs and we did not give our full consent. It was a whole thing. So just the general drug culture and then this sort of Edgewood experiment controversy are, I think the two things that are the most probably real life things that are relevant to this story.
I definitely want to read about that Edgewood thing. I had not heard of that before.
Yeah, I'll link that one in the show notes too. It's a short read, but it's also pretty interesting.
Anyway, there was this big offensive coming up, right? Everyone knew it. Time Magazine, Huntley Brinkley, and the brass was scared, man, because they knew we couldn't win. Morale was down. It was getting ugly in the States. Oh, you remember.
Yeah.
So a couple days later, they decide to use the ladder on one test battalion. Yours.
So I want to dive right into sort of the deep end of the pool here, because I think in order to talk about the whole movie, we need to talk about the big thing, which is what did you think was happening throughout the course of this movie? Did you think it was a drug hallucination? Did you think he was dead? Did you think it was purgatory? Did you have any thoughts?
So that's a great question. I didn't really remember any of the details from when I had watched it about 15, 16 years ago. I remembered the vibe, if you will, but I didn't really remember anything about the plot. And so I just knew Vietnam vet, can't trust reality, lack of clarity about what's real and what's not. That was all I had in my head going into it this time. And of course, the title was in my head. And so I'm thinking Jacob's Ladder. Jacob falls asleep and has this dream or vision of a stairway leading to heaven, right? So that's what I'm going in with. So when I'm watching the opening scene in Vietnam and I see everybody start to freak out, and acting strangely, and it's right after you see them smoking pot. At first, I'm thinking, this is like, there's something in the marijuana. There's some kind, it's laced with something that's making them go crazy. And then, I felt like my mind was exploring all kinds of different options while I was watching the movie, because then when it cuts to him waking up on the subway, I assumed that what we had just seen was a dream, with some details being memory and some details being fabricated by his dreaming mind. So in that moment, I felt like his compatriots, going crazy out there was more a fabrication of his mind than perhaps an actual memory. I thought maybe what was real about that dream was the memories of terror and ambush and violence and the horrors that you see. And then as you keep going and we're presented with these different versions of reality where he's on the subway, he appears to have just woken up from a dream, or is it a fast forward in time? We're not totally sure. But then we go through a couple other things, and then he wakes up and he's next to his ex-wife, Sarah. So then I'm thinking, is this like Inception? Is this like
is
a
it
dream within a dream within a dream within a dream?
Mm-hmm.
And so I was kind of just really enjoying that ride, where I felt like a lot of what we're seeing seems like reality, but there's enough sprinkled throughout that just seems a little off, or, just one detail that's frightening amidst a sea of like mundane other details, that I was just enjoying that feeling of not trusting anything that I saw and not necessarily wanting to nail down like, oh, this is reality, or this is a dream, or this is a hallucination. I will be honest with you, it didn't really occur to me that this could be purgatory until the end of the movie. That's not where my mind was. I was thinking more like PTSD, trauma, psychiatric instability. That's where my mind was more focused during the movie. But I was comfortable with that ambiguity. I was comfortable with not necessarily thinking definitively like this is real and that's not real. It's more like, let it just wash over me and I'll see how it shakes out, and I'm just going to go on the ride with him. So what were you thinking?
It's hard for me to remember exactly how I felt, but I remember being surprised at the end. So I think like they do something really smart in this movie where they do set him up right off the bat kind of as an unreliable narrator. And because of that, I think it's easier to then just go along for the ride. And you never really feel like the rug is totally pulled out from under you, because you keep thinking like, oh, well, he's got grief. He's got trauma. He's got PTSD. He maybe at probably halfway, maybe a little more than the halfway mark through the movie, then we're told that there were drug trials. So now we're like, okay, you may be having drug side effects. Although I will say that in a movie where nothing is solid and nothing feels real, Jacob himself feels very grounded,
100%.
Yeah, like he's just a guy and he's just a mailman. And like, I think Tim Robbins' performance makes it really easy to follow him, even though we're never quite sure where we are. And so even though I remember once whenever, Louis gives that little speech where he says, Eckerd saw hell too. He said, the only thing that burdens in hell is the part of you that won't let go of life, your memories, your attachments. They burn them all away. But they're not punishing you, they're freeing your soul. So the way he sees it, if you're frightened of dying and you're holding on, you'll see devils tearing away your life. But if you've made your peace, and the devils are really angels freeing you from the earth. Once we got to like that speech, because Louis all along is like giving him little hints, I was like, is he dead? Which I think is what, like, I don't think the film was trying to hide that, like there's little hints here and there. But even after that, they don't introduce the like drug trial stuff until after we've already heard Louis say that. So even if we're thinking, oh, he's dead, then they introduce the drug trial stuff and you're like, oh, maybe not.
That's so realistic, right?
Maybe there is a conspiracy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
And I love that about it.
I agree with you about Tim Robbins' performance. And Joey, my husband Joey, actually watched this with me. And we both agreed that there's something so real about his performance. And I turned to him and I said, he doesn't seem like he's acting at all. He has a very naturalistic way of performing this role that he seems like just a guy, like a regular guy. The way he interacts with Jesse and the way he, kind of smiles in a bashful way when he's talking to the palm reader who tells him he's already dead. And but he kind of laughs it off, and she's got a smile on her face, but she says, it's not funny. But the way he, before she says that, she's kind of like a little flirtatious with him. And he's kind of got this all shucks look. It's just, he really feels like a real person. And so, like you said, it's easy to follow him throughout this story, even though you're right, he is unreliable as a narrator. We don't know what he's really experiencing or not experiencing. But it is easy to read his emotions, and the character's emotions are real. Moments when he's afraid, or moments when he is totally gripped by those feelings of loss, that come out of nowhere, like when he unexpectedly sees the picture of his son. Or for me, one of the most heart-wrenching moments in the whole film is when we've just seen the sequence when he wakes up in bed next to Sarah and his 3 boys are there, and he tucks them all back into bed because they're awake too early, and he tucks them back in. And it's like he's gone back to this life that you can sense that he was longing for. And again, we don't know. We're not sure if this is a dream or a memory or hallucination or it's real. And then it cuts to him waking up next to Jesse again, and he's recovering from the fever. And she's saying, oh, don't worry, you're going to be okay. Isn't this great? And she is expecting him to be happy. And she doesn't know that inside his mind, he has to lose that belief that maybe he's regained that old life. Oh, it was all a dream. Like, have you ever had a really good dream, but then you wake up and you actually feel sad because it wasn't real?
Yeah.
It's like that.
Yeah.
This happened to me a lot after my dad passed away. I had a lot of recurring dreams that he had been sick, but he had recovered. And he came home from work one day and I had thought he was dead, but in the dream, he came back. And I was like, oh, Dad, I thought you died. And he's like, no, I'm fine now. I got some treatment and I'm fine. And it was so joyous. And then to wake up and realize that hadn't happened. That's what I felt in that moment in the movie when Jacob, comes back to consciousness with Jesse. It's just, you can see that pain on his face that he has to experience that loss all over again while she's expecting him to be happy and he can't let on.
You know what's so interesting about that too is I do remember my first impressions of them together. I was like, they seem like a real odd pair. Like, I don't know how these 2 people ended up together. And so then when he's talking to his wife and he's like, oh my gosh, I had this nightmare. I was living with the woman from the post office. It was awful.
Yeah.
So then, yes, when he does go back to her, it's a little hard. It's a little hard.
And he's, like you said, he's just described it as a nightmare. And so now he's back in the waking sort of nightmare.
Yeah. So actually, I want to talk a little bit about that because I have a little bit of a theory watching it this time because, like I quoted earlier, Louis has already told us that there are angels and demons, or they're angels, but they appear like demons to you because they're trying to remove these obstacles, right? And so I have this theory that maybe everybody that seems good in this movie is a demon and everybody that seems bad is an angel. What set this off is that, Louis specifically says, your memories, your attachments, they burn them all away. There is a shot of Jesse throwing the photographs of his family into the furnace, like at their apartment. And that's not subtle, And I I can't remember if they show that when he's actually saying that quote. I don't think so, but they're not that far apart.
It's before. No, she throws those out before he says the quote.
And you think, like, my first reaction was like, God, like, what a terrible woman. Like, she doesn't want him to, like, look at pictures of his dead son. She doesn't want him to, like, think about his children. You know, she's trying to, like, pull him away from all of that. And then I remember thinking, like, what? She's burning photos of his family? Like, that's awful.
When I saw that, I was like, she's definitely a demon.
Right? That's what you would think. But if you think about it, like, his family is basically the thing that's, like, sort of keeping him, trying to, like, remember his family is sort of the thing that's keeping him on the earth. Like, okay, if you think about, like, after he goes to the horrible hospital, the traumatic hospital event, he wakes up and his family is there and his chiropractor is there. And they're like, no, you're fine. Like, the chiropractor, like, takes him out of the hospital and is like, oh, you just need an adjustment. I'm just going to give you an adjustment. And his wife is like, oh, honey, everything's fine. So to me, it's almost the reverse of what it seems, in that all of the stuff that happens with Jesse, like the horrors, that's supposed to be like, wake up, Jacob, like, you need to cross over. And all the time that he's with his family and he's with his chiropractor, it's like, no, everything's fine. Everything's normal here. Everything's fine. Like, you don't need to worry about it. And I don't even think that it has to be, like, really that binary of, like, who's an angel and who's a demon. It's more about what Jacob is perceiving in his mind. And the fact that Louis has told us, you see devils, but they're really angels trying to free you from the earth. Like, I think that phrase is the, like, key to this movie.
Yeah, and I was still kind of chewing on that even after watching it, because I didn't really understand what he meant by that. But the way you explain that theory, that actually makes a lot of sense. And it reminds me of that Buddhist teaching that it's your attachments that will cause all your suffering. Like, and those attachments can be to material things, or even like emotional attachments to people in your life that you want to hang on to. And so what happens when that person stops being in your life for whatever reason? You know, they leave or they die or the relationship changes or whatever. And that's what's causing your suffering, or your expectations of a partner or a friend or a child. Like, those expectations are an attachment. And those are the things that are keeping you from being at peace or being happy. So that makes a lot of sense. I like the way you said that, because that kind of made it click for me a little bit better.
Well, and there's also this idea, because, like, clearly there's a lot of biblical stuff in this movie. He's looking through a book that has these, like, it's like an illustrated manuscript of purgatory, but there's a book on his shelf. The Tibetan Book of the Dead is, like, on his shelf very prominently in one scene. And so I did a little bit of reading about that. And there's this idea, it's called bardo, and that's basically limbo. And, like, bardo is the journey between when you die and when you're, like, reincarnated in this Tibetan Book of the Dead. And so this passage that you go through, this bardo, is like a sort of purgatory type place where you have these, like, visions and all of this stuff, like, while you're, you know, on your way to the next life or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, that's a perfect thing. So, like, what you just said about, you know, the attachments and stuff, like, that's all part of it. It is interesting how there's multiple sort of, like, spiritual mechanisms at work here, because there's definitely Buddhist stuff. There's obviously, like, Christian stuff going on.
Well, and Jewish stuff. I like the story of Jacob's ladder is also a part of the Torah and studied. And, you know, sometimes with, I think, slightly different interpretations in Judaism than Christianity. I'm not an expert on that, but
yeah, that's one of the things I came across, actually. This doesn't have any, like, relevance to the movie, but okay, so there's the Jacob's ladder where he dreams and he sees the angels ascending and descending. Same Jacob also later wrestles with an angel. And that story was shorter than I remember from, like, when I was a kid. It's, like, just 2 verses, but he wrestles with this angel all night long, and the angel, like, puts his hip joint out of socket. And he asked the angel, he said, what is your name? And the angel never tells Jacob his name. And some people think that that's Jesus for different reasons. And I'm sure the Jewish interpretation of that is not Jesus.
Yeah, I would think not.
Which I don't know why that would even be important to the story. But that is, so Jacob's Ladder clearly directly referenced in the title of this movie and the themes of this movie. But I also thought that Jacob wrestling with angels is also a very, apt theme for this movie, because that's basically what's happening,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that kind of changes how I was thinking of everything then, because I was thinking of Jezzy as a demon. I was thinking of, the receptionist, some of the more minor characters. There's the receptionist that's terrifying, Santa who robs him, maybe even Geary the lawyer. I had it like a question mark next to that in my notes. And then on the other side, I was thinking of Gabe as an angel, absolutely Louis as an angel, the chemist as an angel, because he saves him multiple times. And then the palm reader with a question mark, perhaps. Not sure about that one. But so then that makes me wonder, maybe it's reversed, like you said.
Yeah. Well, because even like, so Paul, his fellow soldier that comes to him and is like, you're seeing these things, I'm seeing these things too. I was like, is this man a distraction? Like, we need Jacob to cross over, and this guy is sending him on another side quest.
Okay.
That like you're seeing these things because of the drugs, because of the conspiracy, right? Veering him off the path, like go down this other path, right? And then also shortly after, Paul is consumed in the flames of an automobile fire. So I was like, oh. So it is, on my first watch, I did not think this at all. But on this watch, I was looking at everybody a little bit differently. And I was like, is the obvious read, maybe not the correct read. And like I said, I don't even know if it's that neat that there's like a bad side and a good side. I think it is more about how Jacob is perceiving his world, And then, of course, by the end, the figure that he sees as his son leading him up the stairs, right? So that's very like comforting and good. And that's what he needs to do. Like, that's where he needs to go. And so all the horror is gone. He gets in the cab and the guy says, where do you want to go? And he said, take me home. Well, home to us is his apartment with Jezzy, but that's not where he ends up. Home is where he lived with his wife and his children. He gets there and sees Gabe, and Gabe leads him up the stairs, and it's beautiful and it's peaceful and it's calm. And there's no tentacles, and there's no monsters. It's just, it's
Tentacle
calm
free.
and peaceful. Yes, and I guess we're supposed to believe at that point he's sort of like accepted his fate, So I do think that continue to lean on just Jacob being an unreliable narrator. We're seeing these things through his eyes, and depending on what his perception is, that's how we're perceiving the people in his world.
Yeah. I mean, do you view this at all as like a struggle for Jacob's soul? Like demons trying to either keep him in purgatory or take him to hell, or versus angels who are trying to allow him to pass over into heaven?
I did not see this as a spiritual struggle at all. My reading of it, especially because of the way it ended, my reading of it was just 100%. This was just his journey to the other side. Like, this is just his own. It's all just happening in his mind. And this is just what he's experiencing in his last moments on Earth. What did you think?
Well, after hearing your theory, I feel like I'm having to kind of rethink a lot of things on the fly. But if
you don't have to adhere to my theory.
Well, but it makes a lot of sense, and so it's making me question. It's making me question. So if the characters that we viewed as demons, such as Jezzy, are really the angels who are trying to kind of shock him out of it and allow him to cross over. But then what about characters like Louis? So if we adhere to your theory, characters like Louis or the chemist who appear to be benevolent and helpful, I viewed both of those characters as angels watching the movie this week. But if they're really not, if they're not actually there to help him, they're there to hold him back, what is the purpose of that? Could that be interpreted as demons trying to keep him from ascending to heaven?
Maybe, which I will say, I never did, I think I said this earlier, but I never did really feel like Louis was a bad influence. Because, Louis is the one who straight up is like pretty direct about what's going on, you know.
Right.
But Louis also encourages him to go to his wife, you know. Which again is one of the things that makes me feel like it's not so much a struggle as just this is all firing off in Jacob's brain, you know. But
I gotta watch it again. Is the bottom
I'm
line?
Like, now I want to watch it a third time because I only started like thinking about this maybe halfway through the movie. So like I feel like now I want to watch it again with this in my mind. And maybe too, like there are so many like little, you know, afterlife sort of references throughout the movie too that might like point us in different directions. Like I love how like the very first scene, the subway scene, there is like a big flaming sign that says hell.
Hell. Yeah, it's not subtle.
No, it's not subtle. And like after he wakes up from the fever dream in the tub, the doctor's like, "Oh, you must have friends in high places."
Yeah, not a subtle, not subtle references there.
Yeah, no, and actually, I found that to be kind of charming, though. I will say,
yeah. I don't need everything to be like, you know, hidden and you know some kind of enigma.
Speaking of like some of these little like Easter eggs and things, like we have to talk about some of the specific scenes in this movie because that's what drew us to this movie in the first place. We were shown a disturbing scene and we're like, oh my gosh, I have to watch this movie someday. So like, I just wanted to talk about kind of like the atmosphere of this movie and some of the unsettling stuff. Like what were some of the scenes that stuck with you?
So overall, I want to start by just saying overall, I feel like one of the things this movie does the best is capture a nightmarish feel. And that's one of my favorite things in horror movies in general is filmmakers who can really capture that feeling of a nightmare that you can't get out of or something that really because dreams are so strange, right? Because we all have them, but you can never make somebody feel what you felt while you were dreaming. And yet we all have, you know, there's like collective experiences that we tend to have in our dreams. And so when a filmmaker can capture that a little bit, it feels a little uncanny in its like recognizability. But there's also something satisfying about that. It's one of the reasons I love Rosemary's Baby so much is the nightmare sequences because they feel so real. And this movie really captures that feeling of the mixture of mundane and horrifying that can be so common in nightmares. You know, like 95% of the dream can feel totally normal and even boring, but there's enough that's wrong that it's terrifying, right? And it feels like you can't escape from it. And this movie, I felt like I was like strapped down in some kind of machine that was taking me on this terrifying ride that I was just like glued in place because it was terrifying but also mesmerizing. So I just want to say that overall, there's so much of that in this movie. You've already touched on some of the most horrifying parts, which are the party sequence that we saw clipped in the Bravo series.
Yep.
Which is, I think, just masterfully done between the acting, the editing, and the lighting. The look of horror on Tim Robbins' face as he's watching his sexy, gorgeous girlfriend dancing very erotically, but it becomes frenzied and sexual, but also violent. And then he glimpses tentacles and like bat wing looking things. And then there's blood inexplicably dripping down her thigh. And it all feels like this like heathen bacchanalia kind of like out of control environment. And the lighting is this strobe lighting that you're only glimpsing like one frame every few seconds. And it's you can't quite tell, you can't quite see everything that's going on. And then it culminates with like a spike coming out of her mouth that has presumably traveled through her body. And that's when he just like loses it and kind of falls to the floor. And I mean, that is absolutely a masterfully psychedelic and terrifying. You called it a bad trip earlier, I think. I mean, that's exactly what it feels like. just unbelievable filmmaking.
The restraint in this movie is fantastic. Like the fact that we do just get little glimpses here and there it's good storytelling because we, like Jacob, are like, did I just see that? But it also makes it scarier. I feel like if we saw some of these things like full on, it would lose some of its power, and just getting little glimpses is fantastic. Also, like what you said about how it captures dream, like the film like feels dreamy, and like not just because of the logic of it, but like there's a lot of like natural light and like just haze coming through windows. There's a ton of like noise on the film that I really loved. I was like, this movie is so gritty and so darkly lit. Just lots of natural light happening, which I love all of that stuff. And so of course the party scene, fantastic. But I really, this time around, was sucked in and sort of engrossed in that first subway scene. And I was like, I don't remember like really being intrigued by this the first time I saw it. But even that, like the way that's put together is so strange and creepy. Like I watched this with my friend Laura, who lived in New York City for a time. And so when he gets off the subway and the subway like stairway is just closed, I was like, Laura, I was like, is this a thing? Do they just close subway exits? And she's like, not that I know of, And so that to me, like if you're somebody who lives somewhere like where you use the subway a lot, that to me would be scary. Like, can you imagine this? Clearly it's late at night because there's like no one on the subway. Can you imagine getting off at your stop like to go home late at night and the door to your exit is closed?
Yeah, I mean, you're basically screwed at that point. I mean, I've never lived in New York City, and so I didn't know if that was a real thing or not. But later, Jesse says, oh, they close subway exits all the time. And I was like, really? Do they? Do they?
Like, I mean, I think probably only if there's like an emergency and they would tell you, like, get off at blah, blah, blah station,
Yeah, like they wouldn't let people off at those stops, presumably.
Yes. And then it just keeps getting weirder because he's like looking and I guess we presume that he's waiting for the next subway car and like there isn't one. And he gets on the tracks and you're like, what are you doing?
So this was all of those details that you're mentioning are what contributed to my sense that this was yet another layer of dreaming. Because most of the details feel normal. Like it's a subway car. It looks like a subway car. It's in a subway tunnel. It lets off at a subway station. But it's the little details that are off, like the exit being closed, or the old woman kind of staring at him and not answering him as he's talking, or the tentacle that you see coming out of the homeless guy. But in addition to that, also, like, his behavior doesn't always make sense.
Yes.
Like, we understand logically what he's doing. There's nothing supernatural about what he's doing, but his motivation is completely unclear. Like, why does he jump down onto the tracks? And he's just walking around on there. And even when the light fixtures start rattling and the light starts coming through the tunnel, he does not get out. He does not get off of the track. He doesn't climb back up. He stays on the track and tries to sort of play chicken with it and guess which way it's going to go. Because there's one of the, I don't know what you call it, but where it splits and it could go one direction or the other. He kind of like moves back and forth and jumps out of the way just in time. But he had plenty of warning. He could have just climbed out.
Yeah, the same way he climbed in.
So it's just one of those like illogical decisions that it's the sort of thing that would happen in a dream. It's just not logical,
Yeah, which to the same effect, but much more horror forward is the hospital scene when they take him to the hospital. And what do they? I think they say we're going to take you to X-ray, and it sort of seems they're going to take him somewhere to do some normal hospital thing that you would do in a hospital, right?
Yeah,
and like. It sort of maybe seems like they're going a little fast at first, but it's like a Nightmare on Elm Street where it's hard to tell at which point it switches from like reality to nightmare because things just, it's like subtly weird and then it very quickly deteriorates into there are crazy people over you and there are body parts on the floor and like
Exactly.
That scene, I mean, hit me like a hammer the first time I saw it. Like
it's almost too much to take. Like it's overwhelmingly disturbing.
Yeah, and that scene too, I feel like that scene to me feels like it was ripped right out of like a late 90s, early 2000s boilerplate horror movie, right? You get there's the way it feels, like the asylum feel, and you get the shaky head guy and all of that. And then I thought this came out in 1990. Like this is the blueprint. Like this is the template. And I was so impressed by that. And specifically like the shaky head thing that we've seen, I mean, like ad nauseum at this point. I believe
it still
it was
creeps
in
me
that
out
same,
though. It still freaks me
it's still creepy, but in that same Letterboxd article, I think he talks about like how he shot that, where he shot it at like 4 frames per second or something. And had the actor like shake his head, and so then when you run it at the normal frame rate, that's how it's all like jerky or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, so he did this, like he crafted this on purpose, like he didn't just rip this off of somebody else. So watching that stuff was also just like a delight. But that hospital scene though, ooh,
I love
so
something you
scary.
said a minute ago where you said that it starts off seeming normal. Maybe it's going a little fast, but it's hard to tell that line where everything is okay and when everything's not okay. And that I feel like that happens a lot in this movie, that there's so much ordinary stuff, but it's just a little detail that feels off, and then you're like on this descent into something that's completely wrong. Because when they're first wheeling him around, it looks pretty much normal, but then they're going outside, and you're like, why are they going outside? Like that's really weird. And then of course it just gets completely out of control, and we're clearly no longer in like a normal reality. But there's a lot of that, and that again, that contributes to that nightmarish feeling. That's like, oh, everything's okay. And then it's slowly dawning on you that things are not okay, as opposed to the movie hitting you with a sledgehammer right off the bat with something like horrifying immediately and sustaining that throughout. Like that might be gross or horrifying or whatever, but it doesn't have that creeping sense of unease the way this kind of style does. So you're absolutely right about that.
At any point, things could get weird, right? Like when he goes, like you were talking about earlier, that scene where he like goes to tuck in his kids and he's just like with his kids in his kid's bedroom. That could have taken a weird turn. You know, it doesn't, but it could have. Like at any moment, this movie can go from normal life to high strangeness.
And that's why it feels so unsettling overall to watch. It's such an unsettling viewing experience because you're kind of off balance from the get-go, because in the very earliest scenes, we see things that seem more or less normal, but then there's like a weird detail or weird twist to it. So then you're kind of like on edge throughout. Like in that scene with his kids, I was on edge because I was waiting for something to go wrong. Or the scene where he's going and he's trying to talk to Dr. Carlson to talk about these weird experiences he's having.
Yes.
And at first it seems like a normal visit to a VA hospital or wherever he is. And then it's a little weird because she's like, oh, there's no Dr. Carlson here. Okay, that's kind of odd, but maybe it's just a mistake. But then it's like, I have no record of you at all. So it's a step further. And then she says something and her voice is just a little too loud. It just doesn't seem quite normal. Her voice is just a little too loud. And then she bends down to pick something up and you see this like gross bloody horn coming out of her head. So it's just that progression that's like, okay, this is a little strange. Okay, that's a bit more unsettling. And oh my God, something's terribly wrong.
Yeah,
so
it's just like slowly turning the dial up. So let's talk about the ending of this movie just a little bit more. What I want to know from you is like, how does the end of this movie make you like feel? Do you think this is like a sad ending or a happy ending?
It's hard to say. I think it's kind of a mixed bag. For me, it's a blend of sadness at the fact that he really never got a chance to live his life, like realizing that his life ended while he was in Vietnam and he never got to come home. And even though there were pain and suffering and torturous memories and things, he was still able to live life and connect with other humans, and just to really fully realize that his life had been completely cut short is very sad, because throughout this movie, he's your protagonist. So you're hoping that he'll find a solution to the problem. He'll find out what caused all this and he'll be able to solve it and then go and lead a normal, happy life. And none of that was ever possible to begin with. You realize none of that was possible. So that's sad. There's a sort of, I guess, bittersweet happiness in the end to see his son leading him up to heaven. Presumably he's going to have a joyous afterlife reunited with his child. And, he's managed to escape from this hell that he's been in these moments that have been expanded into like, multiple days of story, but it still feels bittersweet, but then there's a third emotion for me in which I feel a little empty, because I don't think I'm feeling what I think the filmmaker wants me to feel, which is a sense of hopefulness about like the afterlife and finding peace and all this, because as an atheist, I don't believe in the afterlife. I don't believe in a soul, separate from the body. And it would be nice to feel like that was something you might have bestowed on you, a happy afterlife in heaven and being reunited with loved ones that are no longer with you. And I just don't believe that. So I think I felt a little like, I think I'm supposed to feel a little hopeful here. I'm supposed to feel some optimism and feeling like death isn't so scary. But I'm not, because of my lack of religious belief. So that, it's one of the inconveniences of being an atheist, I suppose. You don't get to look forward to that.
You don't get the warm fuzzies.
No. But I also don't have to be afraid of hell. So there's that.
I think so. This movie is so strange and so dark, that I mentioned earlier that it went in some directions I didn't expect. And the ending is the direction I didn't expect. Because to me, it did go from this like hellish chaos to this like calm peace. And I did get the hopeful feeling.
I'm happy that you did.
Yeah, I did get the hopeful feeling. And I think for me, it's not even about like, oh, he's going to be reunited with his son in the afterlife. I don't even know if I like believe that. But to me, it's like this torture that he's in, this limbo where he's living in this nightmare, it's over, like it's over. And so to me, there's just a comfort in that, knowing that like he's wrestled with his demons, so to speak, and his struggle is over. And so I think, honestly, I kind of think no matter what you believe, whether there's an afterlife or we just end or whatever, I do think that there is like a peace and a hopefulness to be found in the fact that like his struggle is over, and he can rest, whatever that means, And that's one of the reasons, too, why I like that we have different sort of religious text and religious ideas in this movie, is that seemingly it's very Christian, but then you see these other things, and as we've discussed, there's these other ideas going on. So I think that sort of supports the idea that he's going on to we don't know what, but he's out of the nightmare, And so I expected this movie to just be like a dark, like a downer. And I love a downer. I love an ambiguous ending. I love a downer. If this movie was going to be about government conspiracy, Vietnam, PTSD drama, I mean, I would be here for it if that was like the message of it, But the fact that it was like about something else and was kind of sweet at the end, I was just not expecting it. And it worked for me. It landed really well for me. And I think part of the reason it landed really well for me is because it's a combo that I don't think I've quite seen in any other movie, And so I really appreciated that about it. And also kind of love that they took the big swing and like gave us an answer. And I mean, we see him in Vietnam pronounced dead.
Yeah.
You know,
I feel like
and I think
that's so uncommon now. Like everything has to be a puzzle to figure out.
Yeah.
I feel like filmmakers are sort of loath to just give answers nowadays. So you're right. It is kind of refreshing.
Yeah. Well, and also, like, if you tried to do that today and you tried to, in 2026, at the end of a movie, say, oh, it was all just a dream. Oh, he was dead the whole time. People would riot. Like, you know, people hate that now. And so that would be kind of my only, like, reservation in recommending this to modern audiences would be, like, are they going to not like that he was, you know, dead the whole time? I just think there's so much more, so many interesting things in it that, like, it's not a rug pull to me. It's not a trick, you know?
No, I definitely didn't feel like I'd had the rug pulled out from under me. No, it felt more like a kind of a revelation. I would like to share something just kind of based on what you said a couple minutes ago about this hopeful feeling of like him attaining peace after going through all this suffering and finally being able to escape from that suffering. I told you off mic earlier that the timing of watching this movie right now is very apropos and like kind of strangely so. If you don't mind, I'd like to share something a little bit personal, which is I have an uncle who just passed away a couple of weeks ago. And actually just in like 3 days from now, I'm going out of town for his funeral. And he was a Vietnam vet. And
Really?
yeah. And like my whole life, I've always been told, you know, that he had a really horrific experience in Vietnam. I've never been told specifically what he experienced, and I've never asked. But I do know that for my whole life, he has struggled mightily with post-traumatic stress syndrome. And you know, there have been sort of good periods and bad periods where he seems to kind of have it more under control and he seems happy, but then other periods where he withdrew and, you know, was kind of keeping to himself more. And my aunt, who is surviving him, she told me a couple weeks ago when I went down to see him before he passed away, she was telling me that he had really been struggling heavily with just terrible thoughts and terrible memories, and that he basically just didn't really want to go on living, that it was just too much to deal with, and he basically just stopped eating. And that's kind of what led to his passing. And I was able to see him literally the day before he died. And I'm so happy I got that chance to see him. It was, you know, an awful thing to see him in this physical state. But when I got the news the next morning that he had passed that morning, it sounds terrible, but in a strange way, I felt some happiness because knowing that he had just been having such a horrible time that he, you know, didn't even want to go on living anymore. It made me feel happy that he, at least like that suffering was over for him, regardless of what happened next, you know, and I don't know what he believed in that regard. I know what I believe, but just because it's what I believe doesn't mean that's what is real. So I don't know where he is now, if anywhere, but at least he's not suffering anymore. And so that was already on my mind. And then I sat down to watch this movie and it was just strange, interesting timing.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And like, I think that reinforces what we all love about art and about movies in particular is that sometimes they come along at just the right time, you know, and like help us deal with things and help us understand things, like help us process things, you know, and I think people don't always expect that in horror films, which, you know, you could argue that this isn't a straight up horror film, psychological thriller, whatever you want to call it. But I love that we still have that, even in our disturbing little stories. Like horror is often about life and death, you know? I mean, that's the stuff. That's the biggest questions in life, and horror really helps us, I think, deal with that stuff sometimes. And so hopefully your viewing of Jacob's Ladder was part of that like process.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm thankful that, I had the opportunity and a reason to watch this movie right now. So.
Yeah.
If you're frightened of dying and you're holding on, you'll see devils tearing your life away. But if you've made your peace, then the devils are really angels, freeing you from the earth.
Jacqueline, why don't you kick us off? Give us your final thoughts.
So there's a lot of things I really love about this movie. For one thing, I think it gives you sort of the impetus to consider very big things, like you were just saying about horror in general. Like, horror literally deals with no less than life and death, right? Like, those are the most important human things that bring up the biggest questions. So it's always wild to me that people think of horror as lowbrow. I mean, like any other genre, there's like cheap and poorly done examples of it, but those are still about those things in their own ways. And on my podcast, your podcast, lots of horror podcasts, I mean, people can have very serious conversations about movies that are seemingly very unserious, right? Because of those big things that come up. And so, but this movie gives you reasons to consider things like the soul and what happens when you die and like in the moments just before and just after. I don't know. I find it very moving. Even as an atheist, I find it very, very moving because I can still appreciate big spiritual questions, as explored through art. I mean, the Bible to me is a work of literature. There are some pieces of religious art that are among the most intriguing and sort of soul-moving that I've ever seen. You don't have to subscribe to certain ideas to appreciate the human experience of pondering those questions to begin with, And I mean, I think this movie is a piece of art. I mean, it is absolutely an artistic exploration of life, death, the soul, angels, heaven, afterlife, all sorts of things. As I mentioned before, I find the acting in this movie to be extraordinary, particularly from Tim Robbins. The word I keep coming back to is naturalistic. It doesn't feel like an actor playing a character. It feels like a guy. Like, this is a person leading a normal life and, well, not a normal life, but behaving as a person does.
I believe this was his first leading role also.
Incredible. But I kept saying to Joey while we were watching it, so there's something about him that's so, like, it just draws me in, and it's because he seems like a real person and not a character. When somebody's playing a character, every word is perfectly chosen. There's no filler. There are no wasted body movements or vocal tics or anything like that. But he engages in all those kind of natural behaviors that humans have when we don't always choose the right word, or we don't know what to say, or we say or say some little silly thing that has no meaning or just to fill time. I don't know. It's just I think a really remarkable performance. I think this movie takes a big swing to tackle big topics. And I think no matter how somebody feels about the ending or how somebody interprets this movie, I think you have to give it a lot of respect for the sophistication of all these different elements that it's trying to explore and ask the audience to think about. It gives you some answers, but it doesn't spoon feed you everything. Like, there are still things to wonder, and there's still things to, debate with yourself about or try to figure out. And, I think it's just really a sophisticated artistic endeavor. On kind of a less grand scale, I think this movie is a great representation of 70s New York, like the kind of pre-Giuliani New York. It feels like you used the word gritty earlier. I would agree with that. It feels gritty. It feels a little unclean. It feels like a place where anything can happen. Like really anything can happen. The way the character of Jesse says, New York is crawling with creatures or New York is full of creatures. You get the sense that she's saying that figuratively, but it also gives you the sense that literally as well. So I always love that. I already mentioned what I said before about the nightmarish feeling that you get and how I think difficult that is to capture and how strangely alluring it is when a filmmaker gets that right. So I love that. I don't have too much in the way of criticism of this movie. If I had to highlight a negative, I would say I think one could argue that this movie is attempting to take too much on. You could say that there are too many pieces that the filmmaker is trying to sort of piece together, such as war, PTSD, drug use, pharmaceutical drug experimentation, grief over a lost child, angels and demons, heaven and hell. It's a lot, you know?
That is a lot. I mean, yes.
It is a lot. And I think I'm not saying this would be better, but I'm saying you could feasibly make a version of this film where there's kind of less stuff in it. And you could still tell a similar story. So maybe there's not a dead son, you know, like maybe he doesn't have that personal grief to deal with. Maybe the grief and suffering he's dealing with is the PTSD alone, or maybe vice versa. So I don't know. I don't know that all the pieces are necessary. They're all interesting, but there are times when it can feel a little overwhelming and it feels like a lot to piece together. And sometimes maybe this is just an excuse for me to maybe watch it a few more times. But I'm not 100% sure I feel like I know where every piece fits right now.
Yeah, I would agree with that sentiment. I would agree with that.
So, but overall, I think this is an outstanding film. I see what you mean about the, modern audiences being outraged by the ending, being, none of this really happened. This was all just kind of in his imagination in the moments before he died. But I don't know. I quite like it because I don't feel like the reason I don't feel like it's a rug pull is because it's not simply saying none of this happened. I think what it's doing is showing what are the things that are going through his mind. Some of these things are memories. And I think we're supposed to think that some of these things are like speculations. Like he never did live with Jesse, right? But this was a person in the daily, well, I guess it would have been somebody in the daily kind of routine of his life if he saw her at the post office before he went to Vietnam. So now that's kind of unclear.
Yeah. See, that's another thing about how you said there's a lot going on is it is hard to know because they said that like his son died before he went to Vietnam, but like, and where this is a fool's errand, but like, so did he never divorce his wife? Did he his son died before he went to Vietnam, but he was still married when he went to Vietnam, right? So all of this stuff with him and Jesse, is that just his scrambled up brain, or did his wife and he really get divorced after his son died before he went to Vietnam, right? Like we don't know.
Right. And if they didn't get divorced, then why would his mind be like fantasizing this terrible thing where he's lost her and he's living with this woman that maybe he knew before Vietnam and maybe he didn't. Maybe this is a totally made up character in his mind, but why would that happen?
Yeah, I would assume that the things we see were like somewhat real things from his life. So I would assume that before he went to Vietnam, he did work at the post office with Jesse. That would be my assumption. And like maybe he had a crush on her. So that's maybe, maybe he had a little crush. So maybe that's why she's his his nightmare girlfriend. I don't know. But I think all of that stuff is sort of interesting to talk about. But also I feel like it's easy to get sort of bogged down.
Yeah, you can get in the weeds on that. And it's like, does it really matter?
Yeah. But well, you know what I also asked is I was like, wait, was the government drugging them? Because in all of his Vietnam flashbacks, what we see is that his fellow soldier is the one who stabbed him. So we're like, so I guess all that stuff we see at the beginning where they freak out and attack each other, like, is that how he really died? So was the government really like drugging them? Was that part true? I don't know.
I mean, it would seem to be. But there's a lot of things that seem certain ways in this movie that you can't totally depend on.
Exactly.
So, yeah, I'm inclined to think yes.
Me too.
But who knows?
So I feel very similarly to you. So I'm probably going to keep this brief, but I do think it's a fantastic movie. I love just being in the atmosphere of this movie. It's very well crafted. Tim Robbins is so relatable. We just love this mailman. Like, I even love that they have the scene of like the neighborhood girls are like singing the Mr. Postman. Whoa. I was like, that's so cute. Like it's main character energy for sure,
Yeah, for sure.
He's clearly the center of this universe. But yeah, this movie would not hang together as well as it does without Tim Robbins for sure. And all of this is not like a straightforward horror movie like I mentioned earlier. I mean, it's very creepy. Clearly, it was ahead of its time, like we mentioned, with a lot of these, sort of effects and styles. I do think, like I said, that the twist ending could feel a little bit stale to modern audiences. But honestly, I think they did a really good job of making we, the audience, second guess what's really going on. Even after we think, oh, he's just dead, they give us other things that make us think, oh, maybe not, And upon a second viewing, I mean, I found myself enjoying it just as much, if not more than the first time. So it's not one of those that once you know it's what's going on, it's no longer interesting. I think every time I watch this movie, I'm going to glean something else from it. It has more to offer than just the plot, as we've discussed. I love paying attention to all the little Easter eggs, to all the religious imagery and the themes. Even the military conspiracy stuff, like that has its own little Easter eggs as well. And so all those things just like serve to make this a really rich movie. And like I said, I appreciate the darkness and the gloominess of this film, but the fact that it ends with acceptance and like a moving on and a letting go is really beautiful to me. We get to see our protagonist, gain some peace, and I interpret it to be, a happy ending in a movie that I did not expect to get any kind of happy ending from. So for me, Jacob's Ladder, I mean, it's really lived up to its reputation after all these years of hearing about it, after 20 years of, hearing about it. And it's one that I would certainly recommend to people. And it's one of those movies that I'm going to continue to like put on when I'm in the mood for just like the dreamy vibes,
Absolutely.
The moody stuff. Like you said, I would consider this movie to be like a piece of art that I will continue to consume. But I wanted to quickly touch on some of the influence of this movie for being such a, I mean, it's horror people know this movie, but this is not one of the juggernauts, this is a relatively kind of like a little bit of a hidden gem for general audiences. And we already talked about clearly the visual influence it had on, I think, mid to late 90s. Like, I think of there were things in this movie that made me think of like a 9 Inch Nails video. Like some of that like industrial stuff. I'm like, if they didn't, they might not have known it. They were pulling from this movie. And apparently this movie was a huge inspiration for Silent Hill, the video game.
Okay.
The people that developed it said that Jacob's Ladder was a huge influence on it. And of course, Silent Hill has become, it's video games, it's movies. It's like, I mean, it's a franchise, it's a brand, Also, the biggest revelation to me was that Christopher Nolan loves this movie and specifically used it as a visual reference for Oppenheimer.
I totally thought you were going to say Inception, like not visually, but story-wise.
I mean, I would say probably that too. If it's a movie he's loved for a long time, I mean, I don't see how it couldn't, Now I want to go back and watch Oppenheimer and see if I can pick up on like specific things.
Me too. I saw that when it came out in the theater, but I haven't watched it since. You saw it already?
Yeah.
Okay. Huh.
Yeah. So I'm like, did it just go into the pot with all your other ideas and like we won't be able to pick anything out or what? But he's just talked about how he loves this movie.
Let's both go watch Oppenheimer and then we'll reconvene and talk about.
Yeah. Have you seen the 2019 version of Jacob's Ladder?
I
Did you know
haven't.
it existed? No.
I don't think so. That doesn't ring a bell. I don't recall hearing about that. Have you seen it?
I haven't seen it, and I was going to watch it just to have a reference for this show, but it's not on one of the, 4 billion streaming services that I have. And I was like, I'm not going to pay for it because what if it really sucks? I wasn't willing to take the risk.
Understood. There's certain things I'm willing to take the risk for, and that probably would not be one of them.
If it pops up on, one of my streaming services and I don't have to pay for it, I think it would be interesting to go down that road. I did read the plot synopsis and they updated it to where it's like either a Gulf War or Iraq, Afghanistan, but like a newer. So they updated the setting. But I'm interested to see if they keep it largely the same or if they, go in a different direction. Because I think you could go some interesting different directions if you didn't want to just tell the exact same story again. But I don't know. I heard nothing else about it. So.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think if it becomes free somewhere, I might give it a chance, but I don't know if I want to take that $4 risk or however much it is to rent it.
Take the $4 risk.
So,
$4 seems like a lot when you're trying to decide whether or not to pay for a movie.
Exactly. I feel like I could see influences in terms of just subject matter in The Sixth Sense and the others. Should we drop spoiler warnings for those as well? Okay, so if you haven't seen either one of those movies, close your ears for a second. But in terms of films about people who don't know they're dead, Sixth Sense was huge, obviously, and the others, had that twist ending. Or encountering demons in real life made me think of Frailty and The Devil's Advocate.
Oh, yeah.
So there, I was kind of imagining lots of well, that also The Devil's Advocate also takes place in New York, and spoilers, Al Pacino is the devil, and Keanu Reeves.
If you've seen the poster, you know that.
But like Keanu Reeves and Charlize Theron, they're seeing demons everywhere. Mainly her, I think, at first. But they're kind of encountering them in real life, and then there's this blurring of what's real and what's not. And also I was thinking of, did you ever watch that series Homecoming with Julia Roberts?
No.
It's from maybe 5 or so years ago, but she works for like a government department. I don't want to say too much, but it's very related to some of the things we were talking about in this movie. I can't remember what you know from the get-go and what gets revealed later, and I don't want to spoil it. So, because it's been a few years, but I think there were only 2 seasons of it, but I thought it was absolutely incredible, and there's a lot of horror references in it as well. It's not like a horror show per se, but weirdly, there's a lot of very specific and deliberate horror references. Like it plays as kind of a suspenseful drama, but they'll use music from the movie Carrie during a very tense scene.
Interesting.
And it's like it's absolutely the music from Carrie. You know what I mean?
One of the creators must be one of us.
I think so. Yeah. Or certain camera shots, even though like the content is not necessarily horror per se, that like the camera angles and the way things are lit often feels like a horror movie. So I don't know, but it's a really interesting show. Would recommend.
So yeah, your list is completely different than mine. I love it when that happens.
Ooh.
So first of all, an occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge, which is a Twilight Zone episode, and also a short story by Ambrose Bierce.
I just read it 6 months ago.
Oh, I haven't read it probably since school. And now I'm like, okay, I need to revisit it. There are 2 Twilight Zone episodes I need to watch right now, and that's one of them. Also, Flatliners from 1990.
Oh, I have not seen that.
Are you familiar with it?
What's the premise again? Because I feel like it's dancing on the edge of my brain.
So med school students are seeing how close they can get to death. So they'll induce death for whatever, a minute, and then their fellow med school students will bring them back. And they keep trying to one-up each other and stay dead longer and longer and longer. And each of them starts to experience weirdness in the world.
Oh, okay. I have not seen that.
And it's a great cast too. It's like Kiefer Sutherland. I think Julia Roberts is in it. There's a Baldwin in it. Like it's
a Baldwin.
I can't remember which. Michael, maybe, I think. Billy, a Baldwin, not Alec. I can tell you
it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. But that's a great kind of, and it is like a sort of thriller with like horror elements, very similar tonally to Jacob's Ladder.
Okay. Definitely
there's
want to watch
a movie
that.
called please do. Yes. Now it's not as well made or as, playing with quite as highbrow ideas as Jacob's Ladder, but I feel like they're a good pairing. Another movie called Sublime from 2007. This man goes into a hospital for a routine colonoscopy and starts to experience lots of weird doings in this hospital. And so you're not sure what's real, what's not real, what's going on. I will say I have not watched that movie in a very long time, and I happen to notice that it has a really terrible Rotten Tomatoes score. So buyer beware, proceed with caution. I really liked it. Sublime 2007. And then the last one I'll recommend is Shutter Island.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that one is different time frame, different setting, different plot, but playing with some of the same unreliable narrator, what's going on, what's real, what isn't, past trauma type stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah. So
I love that we didn't have a single overlap on our list.
Nope. I do love it when that happens. Like it's because it's funny to see how people like draw different parallels, to different types of media. But
totally.
Yeah. So Jacqueline, thank you so much for coming on. This has been a blast. It's flown by.
I know. Thank you so much for inviting me. I feel very honored.
Absolutely. And remind folks again where they can find you and maybe tell us what's coming up next on A Cut Above.
Yeah, well, you already know what's coming up next on Cut Above.
I do.
So we just recorded an episode on 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple. I don't think it's out yet, but it should be out very shortly. And then our next episode we'll be recording will feature you, Nicole, as we discuss not a movie this time, but the Hulu series Over the Garden Wall. So we'll be talking about that this week, and it'll be out just a couple of days after that. So mid-August is when that will happen. So that's what we got going on. And then let's see, do we have any theme? Yes, I'll go ahead and spoil the upcoming theme because September we have a theme. It's going to be Shark-tember.
I love it.
So we've got a whole slew of shark movies coming up in September, so that'll be lots of fun.
Yeah, that is fun. And that's a little different too, because most people would do that kind of thing like, June, July, like right in the summer. So I feel like once again, you guys are doing a swerve.
Yeah, and we might not be picking movies that people would necessarily expect for a shark themed month. So maybe not totally obvious choices.
Okay. Oh, I can't wait to find out what that's going to be like. So, well, thanks again for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Nicole. You're the best.
So for me, this cycle of religion and horror has come to an end. Of course, this is a subject that's like really near and dear to my heart. So there will be more. We'll be returning at some point to do more religion and horror. But for now, we're going to be moving on to a new series, and that series is Southern Gothic. So next month, I'm going to be joined by Bob from Straight Chilling, and we're going to kick off Southern Gothic series with The Skeleton Key from 2005. Can't wait for that. Like, I've loved that movie a long time. I know Bob's a fan, so like I've literally for years been looking for the right opportunity to invite Bob on to talk about The Skeleton Key. So I'm very excited about that. Also in September, I'm going to be releasing my fall line of candles. For anybody who's not familiar, I do hand-poured small batch soy candles. And so if you need a little something extra to set the mood for spooky season, please visit my website and get a candle. September 1st is when that will be live. So until next time, please don't wander onto the subway tracks and stay spooky.
Thanks for tuning in. You can find the show on Instagram and Facebook at Light and Shadow Pod. Sign up to become a supporter on Patreon for early access to all episodes and more. Please rate, review, and subscribe to help other people find the show. Until next time, stay spooky.